Camilla is likely to be a bit nervous about the upcoming coronation and that her ex-husband...
He is 86 years old. He sits in a house in Wiltshire behind gates, and on the desk in front of him sits a leather-bound journal that has reportedly not been opened in 30 years. And the reason Andrew Parker Bowles has never explained why he walked away from his marriage to Camilla has, according to almost every account that has surfaced since, very little to do with what the country was told in 1995. For 3 decades the story has been clean. The retired army officer steps aside gracefully so his wife can be with the future king, the understanding one, but lay the timeline out and it comes apart in your hands, because what many people who've looked at this closely now believe they're looking at is something else entirely, not a marriage that failed, an institution allegedly managing a man who knew too much, and a silence that reportedly cost him almost everything he owned. Before we go further, large parts of what follows are claims. I will tell you when something is documented, and I will tell you when it is not, every single time. This is commentary, not a court filing. If you're new here, subscribe now, because the second half of this is where it stops being a divorce story altogether. January 1995, a London law office. Andrew Parker Bowles sits across from senior figures connected to the royal household, divorce papers on the table carrying a confidentiality clause that would keep him quiet for the rest of his life. Everyone assumed he was simply clearing the path for a quiet payoff. What allegedly happened was nothing like that. The pressure, according to the version repeated for years, went straight for the only 2 things he'd ever cared about: his loyalty to the crown and his 2 children. If he contested the divorce, if he forced a true timeline into open proceedings, the entire royal family would be dragged through discovery, depositions, financial audits, the succession itself allegedly at risk. And Andrew Parker Bowles understood exactly what was being asked because of who he was. This is the fact almost every version of this story underweights. He was not a civilian who married in. He was Brigadier Andrew Parker Bowles, Northern Ireland during the Troubles, Rhodesia during the handover, commander of the household cavalry, and silver stick in waiting to Queen Elizabeth II, personally responsible for the sovereign's physical safety at state occasions. So when he was allegedly told that fighting would destabilize the crown, they weren't talking to an outsider. They were talking to the man whose career was built around protecting the monarch's body. He signed, he agreed to be the villain, and the cost is said to be sitting in that journal right now. Here's where it gets strange. Everyone assumed Charles had paid him off, millions drawn from the Duchy of Cornwall. Why else does a man in that position just disappear? But the record tells a different story. There's no evidence he received anything. No settlement, no disclosure, no number anyone has produced. According to the accounts, he refused the arrangements offered and walked away with essentially his army pension. Middlewick House was sold, that part is documented, reportedly just to clear debt. He allegedly wanted his children to one day look at the records and see their father hadn't sold their mother to the future king. But that empty bank account reportedly points to something bigger. Lord Goodman, a feared legal fixer in London, allegedly made quiet visits into Wiltshire from late 1994, not under his own name, working for a small unnamed group of Crown advisors over one concern: a contested divorce could force the court to examine the Duchy of Cornwall's private accounts. In the mid-90s, coming out of a recession, that scrutiny wouldn't produce a scandal. It would produce a constitutional emergency. I have to be straight, there's no document confirming any of this. Goodman died in 1995 and never addressed it. The palace has never commented. What was real was the atmosphere. Royal finances genuinely were a live, uncomfortable question that decade. The story borrows from something true. That's exactly why it lands, and exactly why you should hold it loosely. If you accept the version anyway, what he was handed wasn't a choice. Stay quiet on a modest pension, or fight and risk the institution he'd sworn to protect. He took the pension. And the palace, in this telling, marked the file closed, which is allegedly where they made their mistake. A man with no assets and no marriage has nothing left to lose. And he still held things no court could touch: security clearances, private diaries, a network built across 30 years in defense and intelligence circles. By summer 1995, he'd moved into a rented London flat, and is said to have spent afternoons building chronologies, tracking when his own protection officers had quietly been reassigned off his household detail, not for a courtroom, for himself. In August 1995, the story goes, a private letter reached him, no threat you could quote, just his children's futures on one side of a scale, his silence on the other. That letter has never surfaced, but to understand why he folded, go back 4 years earlier to 3 minutes in a tent that allegedly reframed everything. In Badminton horse trials, May 1991, rain hammering the canvas. Andrew Parker Bowles near the back with a drink, watching the room the way a man does when he spent his career responsible for who's in it. and Diana walks in past the organisers straight to his corner. For 3 minutes, the most photographed woman on earth stands beside the husband of the woman her own husband is involved with. She allegedly tells him they're both being handled, treated as manageable variables by the same officials, that his phone is being monitored not to catch him doing anything but to establish what he already knew, that the shape of the future court had already been sketched and neither of them was on the page. I have to flag this hard. There is no source for that conversation, no witness. Diana never referenced it publicly. This is folklore, sharpened over years of retelling, and it should be held at exactly that distance. What is real? 2 separate intercepted private royal phone calls did end up in newspapers in that era, and nobody has ever satisfactorily explained how. The whisper in the tent is the part nobody can stand behind. Still, according to the story, he checked, and within 48 hours, a contact allegedly confirmed a device in the telephone junction box outside his Wiltshire house. Live. No device was ever produced. No engineer confirmed it. It's a claim. But if true, it would have broken something specific in a man who'd spent his life on the other side of that equation. Infidelity is personal. This would have been structural. Which brings us to July 1992, a polo match at Cirencester. After the whistle, Andrew allegedly intercepted Charles in the changing rooms. No mention of Camilla, just a handwritten list of dates placed on the bench, and one condition: stop the monitoring or he'd use his retirement to go to the press. And Charles, in this telling, went pale, didn't deny it, said the security establishment's actions weren't within his control, and left without touching the paper. 48 hours later, the device was gone. I need to be completely clear, there is zero evidence this conversation happened. Nothing here suggests the king authorized or knew of any surveillance, and no credible account has ever been put to the palace for comment. What the story wants you to take from it: the threat receded, but the institution now allegedly had a strategist who believed he held evidence and had shown he'd use it. On June 29, 1994, Andrew Parker Bowles watches Charles admit infidelity to millions on national television. According to the accounts, the timing wasn't spontaneous. Once it was on the public record, there was no version of staying married that didn't read as consent. Every door closed at once. A few weeks later, an unmarked envelope allegedly reached him, internal scheduling material suggesting the confession had been planned months in advance. He's said to have packed it into a briefcase alongside his own logs, knowing that using any of it risked the Official Secrets Act. None of those documents has ever surfaced, and this is a claim that's grown more specific with every retelling than any sourceless claim has a right to be. One thing has to be said plainly, then set down. There's a claim widely circulated tying the 1982 Hyde Park bombing, in which Andrew Parker Bowles' own regiment was attacked, 4 soldiers and 7 horses killed, to leverage allegedly used against him a decade later. I won't reconstruct that. There's no evidence for it, none, and using a genuine atrocity as a plot device in a story about a marriage does something ugly to the memory of the men who died that morning. So we leave it there, fully, strip that out, and what remains is harder to explain. By autumn 1993, Andrew Parker Bowles had reportedly decided that whatever was being held over him, the cost of forcing it into the open was higher than carrying it silently. February 1996, Andrew marries Rosemary Pittman, quietly, no press. The country read it as a rebound. According to the version told since, it was the execution of an understanding reached 4 months earlier, a lunch with Camilla's brother Mark Shand, who allegedly carried a message: a contented ex-husband is not a story. A bitter single one is a stick to beat everyone with. His children, Tom, 21, Laura, 17, were allegedly the real subject of that lunch. Doors kept open in exchange for Andrew's public performance of contentment. Here's what's actually documented, where speculation becomes fact. You can check. It worked. Tom Parker Bowles became a successful food writer. Charles has been his godfather since 1974, long before any of this became public. Laura built a career in the London art world. Neither has, in 30 years, with life-changing money on offer, ever sold a word about their family. There's a further claim that in November 1994, weeks before the papers were drafted, Andrew was told he had a serious cardiovascular condition and told no one. If true, it reframes everything. Not a man stepping aside defeated, but a man doing estate planning against a deadline, clearing the way for someone who could secure Camilla's future. I have to be straight one more time. There's no medical record, no statement, no source. He's alive, 86, and his health is his own business. I'm including this only because you'd encounter it elsewhere, not as fact. What's documented is that he didn't die. April 2005, Charles and Camilla marry at Windsor, and Andrew Parker Bowles is there, in the chapel, watching. Sit with that for a second, not the concept, the actual afternoon, turning your head the way everyone does when the bride comes in. Reporters called it civilized, dignified. According to the version told since, they were watching the final clause of a 10-year-old understanding being quietly discharged in public. As the guests moved toward the reception, Andrew Parker Bowles reportedly walked back to his car alone. Now Camilla is Queen, crowned at Westminster Abbey, May 2023, one of the most complete reversals of public standing in modern British history, 25 years of rehabilitation until the country no longer had the energy for the argument. Across every year of it, the man she was married to for 21 years said nothing. Every reopened biography, every anniversary, each one a phone call away from a front page and a very large check. He declined every single one. Long he still appears at major state occasions, rank and history earning him a place on the list. And there's an observation people have hardened into something more than it is, that seating is arranged so he's never in frame with the Queen. No such instruction has ever been produced. That's speculation dressed as procedure. What's true and checkable in archive footage, he's present and he's peripheral, in the room, not in the picture. What's plainly documented is bleaker than any conspiracy. He outlived Rosemary, who died in 2010 after 14 years of marriage. 14 years is not a maneuver, it's a life. He's been a widower since, living quietly behind his own gates while his children attend palace occasions as the king's stepchildren. And he's kept every commitment he's said to have made in 1995. No memoir, no interview, no correction ever to a single story that painted him as the man who simply let it happen. Because a 30-year silence isn't one decision, it's a decision made again and again. Every phone call declined, every dinner where someone said something false and he let it stand. Roughly 11,000 days of choosing one more time not to speak. There's one last claim, and unlike almost everything else here, it doesn't need a villain to make sense. That he still holds a pass to his old barracks and uses it once a month or so after dark, walks through the stables, talks to the young troopers, checks the tack. I can't confirm that. No log has ever been published. But I understand exactly why the story needs it. One place left where his name still means what it originally meant, not the man in the headlines, just the officer, in a yard he commanded, with animals that don't read newspapers. So the real question isn't why he walked away. It's what it takes to keep walking past every open door for 3 decades in a country that would have paid handsomely for one sentence, because none of that is rumour. That part is simply what happened. At 86, with that journal reportedly still on the desk, the deepest version of this story belongs to the one man who never asked to be in it, written as the villain so everyone else could be something better, and who has never once corrected the record. If this was worth your time, subscribe. Next week, same decade, completely different direction, and a person at the center of it whose role has been quietly written out. Thanks for watching.